Good afternoon. I'm Leonard Napolitano, Capture CEO, and on behalf of all of us from Capture, welcome to Innovate 2020. I would like to begin with a moment of silence for George Floyd. Our thoughts of comfort go out to his partner, Courtney Ross, his 3 children, family members, and the national community his life has touched. I welcome you to take a moment of silence with me and the Capture family. Today, our community is coming together in force, representing almost 10% of the total enrolled U.S. college population, 160 plus institutions, dozens of organizations, streaming live across 5 platforms: YouTube Live, Twitch, Facebook Live, LinkedIn, and Periscope, to ensure any individual at any institution in any enrollment office can have access to Innovate's 2020's content. This is exciting, and this is part of our commitment to one another. We as a community are at an inflection point. For months, the ashes of 2 major events have fallen upon us: a pandemic and a national grassroots movement demanding racial equality and social justice. Furthermore, these events have impacted every facet and population of our society in a magnanimous way. For every institution, for our community as a whole, institutional revenue will decrease by $423 billion, averaging 20% per institution. Nevertheless, each of our communities look at us as being a beacon of opportunity, and we must not let the ashes stop each of us from achieving our institution's vision, but use the ashes as the fertilizer to grow and evolve our organizations, to reconnect with prospective students, to re-engage with our community and our mission, to re-energize our staff more than ever, while redefining how we're going to measure success. Though not easy, this is our time to turn a moment of crisis into a moment of opportunity. Future forward together. This is what the next 3 days are about for our enrollment community. When I hear the word unprecedented, it means unprecedented collaboration, as seen between Colby Sawyer College and Dartmouth Hitchcock Medical Center when they made a strategic investment to implement new healthcare programs. Or it's unprecedented innovation, as in the case of Southern New Hampshire University or Lindenwood University, who changed their incoming strategy of tuition for their incoming freshmen. Or it's unprecedented reassessment of our institutional mission, and as stewards of articulating that mission, what is the best way to do something with constraining resources? This is exciting. This is not scary. None of us have gone through this before, but all of us are battle-hardened and ready to succeed. We are unique in the United States and globally in the education community because we have the opportunity to support one another by sharing ideas, by sharing the things that we have seen, our experiences, in order for us to continue to be a beacon of opportunity in all of our communities. The outcome of each session over the next 3 days is to provide tactics you can implement immediately on your campus. Transylvania's Laura Rudolph will talk to us about how to design effective email campaigns for a generation of prospective students who increasingly stay away from their email accounts, but are highly responsive when receiving the right message at the right time. Our partner, Platform Q, will share effective methods to increase online student engagement when working with behavioral intelligence. John Forrester, a member of Capture's data science team, discussing the core tenets of predictive modeling, and at each stage of the enrollment decision journey, why those tenets are still critical more now than ever. Or NYU's Dr. Rossi, acclaimed data scientist, and by the way, a fire-eating performer, reminding us about the importance of the scientific method in today's enrollment environment. Or Plexus saying, there's a new way to think about search methodology in a test optional era. And then lastly, a panel of 5 industry experts describing their own path forward, the lessons learned, the black and blues experienced, and some of the most memorable highs. Innovate is about action. And to demonstrate our commitment to our community, Capture is matching Innovate 2020 attendees and our employees' donations up to $5,000 to the Boys and Girls Club of America and the National Urban League to help fund youth programming. This does not erase the social injustice of the past or the present, or solve the important and heavy issues we are still facing as a nation today. But we all must play a small part in helping to educate the next generation of youth to impact future change. This is Capture's ongoing commitment to creating sustainable education opportunities, and we hope you join us by going to capture.buzz/donate. As I end my welcome remarks, thank you for spending today, tomorrow, and Thursday with us. We understand all of our time is important. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Jamie Gleason, Capture's Director of Undergraduate Initiatives and a member of your community. Jamie?
Thanks, Nappy. It's good to be with you today, and I'm certainly excited about the next few days. The opportunity to present at Innovate is truly an honor, and even more so, it's an honor to just have our guests give us their time. Let me tell you a little bit about who I am and kind of why I'm here. As the Director of Undergraduate Initiatives, what that means is that within Capture, I kind of form the nexus between product and sales and fulfillment, and try to work all those together and understand what's happening in the market. But prior to coming to Capture, I was able to be in charge of 2 admissions offices here in the Philadelphia area where I live. And personally, I find these to be relevant. Personally, I'm also a farmer and a fixer at heart, 2 terms that I feel like are directly applicable to the enrollment management world that we live in. So it's an honor to be with you today, to be with all of you today, and I'm excited for what the next few days hold. And I think that we lost Nappy, so I'm going to go right into this.
I'm right here.
Okay.
I realized today more than 50% of the attendees probably don't know who we are at Capture. So I wanted to spend 1 minute to share with you who we are. At Capture, we have one mission. And we have a mission because we're trying to solve the most important problem, the fit between the institution and the student. It's one of the most important decisions an individual is going to make, has one of the biggest impacts on one's life, and we have to get it right. Is this the right institution for me as a student? And conversely, for the institution, is this the right student for my institution? And when we get that right, what happens? Well, not only does the student progress, but our yield improves. Our first-year student retention improves. Our retention, our 4-year graduation rate improves. And not only that, we hopefully have successful alumni. We at Capture execute our mission by focusing on 3 areas. 1, a behavioral intelligence platform, a software platform that combines marketing automation with predictive analytics to support the entire enrollment decision journey. Because the engagement and giving someone information that's relevant to them should be based upon them and their behavior. And furthermore, supported by a series of solutions, whether it's procured via Capture, or maybe you're doing something via social networks, but it's plugging that into that behavioral intelligence platform so you can incorporate that into the data set and maximize every marketing engagement. And lastly, managed by a team of experts. I'm humbled to say, from my account executive team, where 50% of them have a terminal degree in their field of education, to our data scientists, to our communication specialists, the best of the best, who are all motivated and driven on our mission. The fit between the student and the institution, executed through these three pillars. This is Capture, and thank you, Jamie.
Yeah, absolutely. And the topic that we're going to handle is massive, right? We all understand that over the last few months, we have gone through and endured some very interesting times. So we're going to talk about 4 tenets to the future forward as Capture sees it. The 4 tenets are listed here in front of you. And because we're going to probably run out of time, I'm going to go right into the next slide and talk through the React. And the good news about React is that for all of us, we have been here, right? This is the world in which we've lived over the last few days, or the last few months. We have seen things happen that many of us never imagined would have to happen. We've decentralized our offices. We've worked with our admissions teams being remote. We have moved our accepted student days to an online format. Our models have been disrupted in a way that is unprecedented. Yet we've still determined that they are the best plumb line for what we need and how we evaluate students. And we've also seen an age of digital dependency that has been unlike any other. For the students that were the prospects that we're going after, the digital natives in the funnel, like for many, this has been a very interesting season where some didn't get to graduate from their high school as they intended. And for the institutions, we've seen the digitally reluctant move to platforms to complete the semester that was in front of them. The response that Capture has had has been unbelievable. We've been able to leverage behavioral insights as a result of these changes and as a product of our iteration. And because of that, we have literally been able to update millions of or hundreds of campaigns for our partners, impacting thousands of impressions in order to get the message out that things are different and that there's a change, and be able to communicate that to our students. We've watched.
Jamie,
Yes.
good question. Of the behavioral insights, which one would you say was the most interesting that you noticed of the change between 2019 and 2020?
Well, how much time do you have?
Okay.
Just kidding.
Ask me for a friend.
I would say this. We have been able to watch this very large trough of activity in an aggregated format and see how admitted students and applications are over-responding above last year. And we're going to get into that a little bit more, but it's been a very interesting study about behavior and where those students are and at what level. The good news about React for everyone out there, and you get to sigh a breath of relief, is that we have potentially gone through some of the hardest part already. We have proverbially ripped off the Band-Aid to this change that is out there. And as that change and reaction was happening, what we've seen happen, and you've all seen this, is this larger narrative start to unfold, a bigger picture taking shape. While we might be tempted to think, oh, this is an anomaly, this might not be a long-lasting reality, the truth is this is a reality that has an opportunity for everyone in the industry. We get to wrap our hands around it. And the next 3 tenets that we're going to cover are going to be incremental on how we do that and where we go in this process. So we've covered React, and now we're going to talk through the reconnection process. Oh, I lost my mouse. Pardon me 1 second.
It's easy to lose a mouse in a field, but go on.
It is. And as a farmer, I can appreciate that.
That's of course.
I call this section Prospects in Process because this is a very interesting time. And this is our current paradigm, right? Many of you who are out there have come to this 3-day session time with us in order to understand more about what's happening in the industry. The enrollment cycle today is still extraordinarily tentative. We have many, many questions that remain, and those questions are not just ours to own. They are the questions that our students have. They're wondering about the fall semester. They're wondering about the distance of the college options that they have on their list. They have questions about online, gap year, when the end time will come, and what is going to happen forward. How will this end in 4 years? What will the labor market look like? All of these questions are culminating during these few months of the summer. And over the last few months, and it currently right now, I think is kind of the hot spot. In reality, what we're seeing here is that the markets are shifting before our eyes, and we have to respond to that. So what does that response look like? How do we, in an analytical sense, turn what we see in data points and happenings into tactical responses? And that's a great question. That is, in fact, one of the things that we want to disclose and discuss over the next few days. But in truth, Capture has a beautiful opportunity. We've been able to, as the previous graph showed, we've been able to watch what that student behavior looks like, not just in an aggregated format as we would see in Google Analytics, but in a very granular geo market type of way where we can actually see these students are moving from here to here, and this funnel level is moving this way and not responding. We've been able to implement and leverage the model scores that were in place prior to COVID and understand what are the implications of not having accepted student day on campus. We've been able to see that. And ultimately, we've been able to push that conversion to yield and assist with that conversion to yield with our partners. Our behavioral intelligence platform, in short, responds to the shifts in real time. It's iterative and it moves when we need it to move. But that reconnection process, I would be remiss to just say that the previous few points met everyone's need. I know that there are folks out there who are listening today who really came because they want to understand what are the tangible takeaways that I can put into practice from what is happening in the market. Well, here they are. This is my uber practical farmer Jamie slide about reconnection. The reality is what we're seeing happen when it comes to the upper end of the funnel. The app.
Is this available in the 90-day almanac by Jamie?
I actually haven't published that yet. That will be a self-publish of 2021. Should life get less busy? I'm not sure yet, though. I'm thinking about it.
Understood.
What we're seeing happen in the funnel is that applicants and admits, as compared to last year for our partners, are actually 50% more active on websites. That means there's 50% more of those types of students in the pipeline and responding to the messaging that we're putting out there. And likewise, the top of the funnel is trending toward a larger mass than we've seen in years past. So what does this mean? What are the reconnection tips that you'd leave me with, Jamie? How do I respond to this? Well, there's a link at the bottom that is a little bit of a insight into that. But let me give 2 quick points. First of all, we've all read the survey results that surmise that students who are potentially looking at a further distance might be rethinking that decision. What I would encourage you to do is redefine local. And I'm going to air quote that because I live in Philadelphia, but I grew up in upstate New York where it's very different. So 100 miles in Philadelphia is very different than 100 miles in Watertown, New York. So understand and take a look at your early season local prospects. Maybe they're inquiries, maybe they're app starts, maybe they're apps who didn't complete. Take a look at those groups and reach back out. Figure out who didn't move forward, who came to campus, and what is happening with them right now. They very well might be the audience that's on your website looking for a new opportunity, or at the very least, assessing whether or not the opportunity that they have selected is the opportunity that they want to stick with for the fall. Secondly, I would encourage you to take a look at your transfer strategy. Transfers have had a double whammy this year. I was listening to a professional the other day who said, we won't know the true impact of the NACAC changes because of the pandemic. And that is a very real truth. However, that does not curb the opportunities that we have to go into that market and understand that there are puzzle pieces that can fit into our puzzle. Take a look at your programs on campus and find underrepresented programs that are transfer friendly. And maybe it's just a very small slice of that non-matriculating audience that you bring in from fall 18 and fall 19 that are interested in those programs and reach out to them and understand that they might be interested in looking at their completion institution, and it might be yours. The next tenet of our future forward together is to re-energize. And let me just talk through time and space here a little bit. I've been talking a little bit. React had to do with the past. Reconnect has to do with the present. And Reenergize and Restore are really future oriented. I want to make certain that I really emphasize that I deeply understand the pressures that you out there are facing. As a former director of admissions, being a chief enrollment officer, I can understand that these changes are unnerving. And while we need to account for them in the short term of the next 90 days, the onus is on us to really understand what are the future implications of what's happening right now. And let me just highlight a few of these items. We all know that the limitations of search are there. The College Board and ACT have not delivered tests for a few months, and for a few months forward, they won't be, which has made a very significant vacuum of name availability for your pools. Markets are shifting before our eyes, and we always understand that economic distress impacts how enrollment happens and also impacts things like discount rate and other items that are related to that. The audience that we're talking to, the institutions that we work at, are very much in a period of uncertainty. And your job, in many cases, the Enrollment Management Office's job, is to move that uncertainty to a more certain, too certain. And what we want to do in the next couple of slides is really just introduce like what that would look like. And it really, what I want to impress most of all is the need to account for these changes, this process of re-energizing, this thinking forward in a way that we've never done it before. In many ways, I like to say that enrollment management is often summarized by the aggregation of historic tools on top of each other, which is not a bad thing. That is not a negative statement. That's actually the truth about many things. But the pandemic that we've faced, the last few months that we've been through, and now the social unrest that we're seeing in our country, this is an opportunity for us to really evaluate what matters. How do we create a system within our institution that is viable, that is stable, and that is sustainable for the future? These are extraordinary times, and I don't want to discount those. But what we want to do is recognize that this new normal, this success, is measured ultimately by the fiscal responsibility that you will demonstrate, along with the measurement that needs to happen in the pipeline that you are dealing with. Capture as a company has a commitment to be innovative and to change as the markets are changing and understand. But beyond that, it's to really see institutions forward. You know, the next 2 years to 5 years are a sea change that is happening within the industry. And the insights that we have been able to gain in the short amount of time over the last 90 days from the millions of impressions that we've seen, those have given us insight into what the future will look like. So here we are. We are in the midst of this. We have the opportunity to look at the past, to impact the current with the items that we've learned and the traffic that we've seen and the data insights that we have. But beyond that, we have an ability to impact the future of our institutions, to re-energize the pipeline, and ultimately to move to a point of restoration that sees our institutions through to something potentially that they've never seen before.
I want to thank you, Jamie. And Jamie and I want Restore is a culmination of the three areas. And we want to start off by saying we've invested thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars in a variety of initiatives comprising of our communications teams, of our marketing teams, of our admissions teams, in order for us to build this funnel to identify the right students. And they include hundreds of assets. And in the end, these assets, just for marketing dollars alone, average to about $1,200 per enrolled student. To recruit a student on average, another study that was published from another vendor in the space is $2,357. That's the median, but that obviously ranges between whether you're a nonprofit, private institution, or a public institution, or for-profit, but those dollars are staggering. And what's staggering is the level of effort that we invest, right, in all of our artifacts, in all the different departments, for us to find that right student. I'd like to challenge you in thinking, okay, now, one, do an assessment as you think about that slide that we just had up, where it shows the aggregation of all of those assets. First and foremost, we must need on the next slide is to invest in a way to measure each of the assets. And secondly, have an equation point where each asset understands its interdependency with one another. This now creates you the ability to have an integrated result, to understand, one, was this worth it? And two, what was the impact to my institution? Both the fiscal impact, but there's obviously the time impact, the different departments that were involved. And that's everything from, we send out email communications, right? We might be using Slate. We might be using a vendor to create it. We're now creating banner ads, and we have social networking and LinkedIn and Facebook and TikTok. And I should even do the flossy, though I'm not very good at the flossy. And think about all of this, but did we ever say from the TikTok, or the people that went to the TikTok, did we find through Facebook, and was that through the lookalike? And from that lookalike, did their parents touch upon the parent newsletter that we sent out when they were a junior? Not everything that can be measured should be measured. And I think the quote from Albert Einstein's an important one. So step one is, where are you spending the greatest amount of time and dollars? And use that as your foundation for the entities you're going to measure. This is going to be critical because the recommendation from us and our community, and I say as a community, from the hundreds of partners we represent, you will want 3 years to do such an assessment. This is how we use today into an opportunity. So when we go to the next slide, I want to leave you with a few equations to think about. And why are they important? To us, restores not only understanding the investment that we're making, why we're making that investment, and doesn't align with the institution, but establishes the next precedent that we want to work with each of our partners and encourage people to work independently of us, is to say, let us assess a full funnel attribution of every single asset and effort that we have invested in, and was it worth it? And this creates very difficult answers, but they're the right answers, and they're what we've been charged with. Furthermore, in doing a full funnel attribution and being able to assess, then you have a foundation that you can build upon to say, how does this now impact my first year student retention? And what are the modalities and the assets that I can leverage? This is us as enrollment leaders taking the helm, that we deserve because of what we're involved in. When someone's unknown to when they become discovered, to when they apply, enroll, and become part of our community, well, we have all this rich information, and we can apply it to beyond. And that's probably going to be a discussion for this fall. But to go back to now thinking about our investment and worthy investments, there are a number of ROI equations, return on investment equations. One will hear. I'd like to leave you with two that are really easy and kind of cool to build off of. The first is net tuition ROI. Why do I think this is so interesting? Because one, we want to use metrics that we can validate and justify, and each of our institutions are able to do this. So we take upon the number of enrolled students times the net tuition minus our spend. And I use the word spend in a generic sense because this then allows you the appropriate segmentation. Is it spend by total recruitment dollars, spend by marketing dollars? So now we have that partnership with our marketing and comms team and the admissions office. Sometimes we are in separate organizations. And then make sure that when you separate that, your The numerator is the spend that you had in your numerator. That's going to give you a net tuition and ROI. What's the important thing is, what's your multiplier? And there are different grades of multipliers, and you want to think about it per program, because some programs we recognize the multiplier will be lower, but the long-term investment for our organization is of significant value. Could be for a variety of other reasons. It could tie into a graduate program or other types of programs that we need to grow. The other, that I think is a really fascinating one, is what's the cost per student? So you heard me talk about, a marketing cost per student, which is distinctly different than a recruitment cost per student. But we want to look at not only enrolled, but then your institution marketing spend per student. So the average is right now about a little over $700. On average, nonprofit institutions are at $1,200. Public institutions are at $185. Again, this will still vary by program. And then when you take that and you look at your total expenditure, this will now give you your cost per student. Why do I like these two equations as a way for us, as we think about going forward, as we think about our way to restore? Because we also have to be able to validate and justify our investment to our own stakeholders, to our CFO, to our president, to our board of trustees. And then these two equations can then enable us to say, from this overarching equation, let us now go through each of our modalities, and through those modalities, layer in a pivot of by every stage of the enrollment funnel. This is sexier than Justin Timberlake. I know you don't think so, but it is awesome. Jamie, back to you.
Thanks, Nappy. And now we all have really good insight as to what Nappy thinks about at the end of the day. He talks about ROI. And in truth, what we love is to be able to optimize the resources that are available to our partners. We want to make the best use of all of those things. So here's the takeaway, right? Here's the walk away slide. When you understand like the four main objectives of what we have to cover and conquer this week, here are the things we want you to understand. The reaction that we've all had, this is in flight. This has happened. Well, we are beyond this, but there is a path in front of us. There is an onus on us to move the ball forward at each of our institutions in order to both have short-term gains and a long-term plan. So to reconnect, I encourage you to proactively engage with transfers and those early cycle prospects who haven't moved forward. Pick out a small group, try a beta or a pilot, and understand like what is the impact, and operate in short sprints so that you can effectively measure what's happening to those groups. Additionally, in re-energizing our institutions, our goal is to pave a path to sustainability. What does that look like in an era where the search market is changing and where academic programs might be in question? I think Nappy hit the nail on the head when he implored us to take a look at 3 years worth of traffic. Like, understand how is the number for search students changing, and how is that going to impact the later on period, the future that's in front of us. And equally as important is to take a look at your program analysis and understand, are these programs growing or are they stagnant, and how can the labor market, and then will the labor market have implications onto that? And Nappy, you want to grab the fourth one for us?
I mean, thanks for letting me grab the fourth one. I think thanks, you're so kind. With anything, you know my passion regarding ROI and establishing the four formulas. It's critical in every way. And when you combine all the, together, with regardless of the formula, it's the same thing to the React. We'd be remiss not to say we've invested a lot of time to adjust a strategy.
Yeah.
And to think about, many of us have extended our, enrollment, our application deadlines. Well, what's wrong with extending it into next year, right? What's wrong with maybe having different application deadlines for different programs?
Yeah.
Right? Recognizing the population that we're dealing with, they might have constraints on their end, right? This is not saying, well, gosh, we did this because of COVID. We're doing this because, you know what? We made ourselves more accessible. And yes, there are operational contingencies we need to think about as an institution, but that to me is the exciting part.
Yeah.
Absolutely. With that, Jamie, did you have anything else you wanted to add in closing?
I actually do not have anything else that I'd like to add in closing, other than I think that your hair looks very, very nice right now.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you for noticing my haircut. And then for those of you who are wondering, before I turn over to Heather, if you are wondering why I have a mustache, as part of my commitment to my nieces and nephews, I've been growing out the facial hair of a variety of different presidents. And this is on my way, being a presidential scholar since I was a wee one. This is on my way to a particular president of the United States. So with that, Jamie and I both thank you. And I turn over to one of my fellow associates, Ms. Heather Mueller.
Thanks, Nat. And I will say, much like the student decision journey has been wide and varied by individual, the journey of your stash has been quite amazing. So thank you for bringing that to all of us. We really appreciate it. Jamie, Nat, thank you so much for that amazing session. The 4 tenets of React, Reconnect, Reenergize, and Restore, I think are inspirational, right? And grounded in solid tactic. And so thank you so much for bringing all of those things to the table. For everyone who has joined and is listening in, I encourage you to submit questions throughout our time. You can do that in whatever channel you're in right now. And as those come through, we'll engage with our presenters. We have a few minutes before we move on to our next session and our keynote with Laura Rudolph. Jamie and Knapp, if I can ask one question before we get to the giveaway part, which I know everyone is excited for, let's be honest, that's why I'm here. Can you talk about some of the really innovative efforts that our partners have demonstrated as they have moved from React and into Reconnect and Reenergize? What are some of the stories that you've heard?
Well, I'm gonna talk, if I can, about my favorite tactic. My favorite tactic is because we live in a society that loves to give their opinion. Right, we love to help both understand like what we think about something and where we are. That's
right. No, not you.
That's right. My favorite tactic that I've seen being used during the post-COVID and kind of migration off campus is the intuitive use of surveys to understand and assess. Hey, where is my audience? It's not just we're not just surmising, right? We have had partners that have put out on their website, like, hey, what's going on? And how are you responding to the things that are happening around you? A few quick radio buttons help us understand, like, hey, where's the student at? And what do they need? So it's a complete drive of the next step by them responding to and giving us some insight as to how they're feeling. And for many, this has been a very scary time, very uncertain time. And this has helped us to gauge, like, what is our tactic moving forward? And how do we meet the needs of the audiences that are out there?
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Jamie. For those who have not registered, please hop onto your website, go to capture.buzz /Innovate USA. You can sign up and register for the event and the giveaways. We'll be doing them throughout the next 3 days. So make sure you drop your name in the proverbial virtual hat. And don't forget, throughout, we will be matching donations that you provide. So if you are in and like to be a part of the change, go to capture.buzz /donate. And Capture will match all funds up to $5,000 of donations, both of our employees and for all of the professionals out in the higher ed industry today. So let's get to the good stuff for a minute. Let's get to the giveaway.
Drum roll.
Drum roll, please. We have our first, which is a $50 Starbucks gift card. And in return, we will match that dollar value with a donation to the Boys and Girls Club of America. So let's... Jamie Knapp, you want to give me a little drum roll? Virtual drum roll?
We are drumming.
I'm drumming. It's not very loud.
Congratulations to Elizabeth G in Texas. Elizabeth, we will connect with you after the event and provide you with all the details to be able to access that donation, that gift card. And in return, we will also make that donation of $50 to the Boys and Girls Club of America. Len, I'm going to flip it over to you so we can bring Laura Rudolph up to the stage.
Thank you, Heather. I'd like to take a moment to introduce Laura Rudolph. Laura currently serves as the Director of Enrollment Communications at Transylvania University. In her current role, she oversees the university's marketing plan, ensuring that all strategies and elements of work cohesively to generate awareness and interest in Transylvania from prospective applicants at each stage of the funnel. She serves as a member of the Department of Senior Leadership Team and a liaison to the Marketing and Communications Office. She has spent 13 years in a variety of marketing and communications roles within higher ed, and I'm excited to welcome one of our partners, Laura Rudolph. Welcome, Laura. Hey, Laura.
Hello, Nappy. How are you?
Good to see you.
It's great to see you. Thank you for that very gracious introduction today. And I'm actually joining you from Transy today.
Oh, well, welcome. I do have to make a statement. I'll let you take over because many people know this. As a Center College grad alumni, our two schools are very competitive with one another. Center and Transy are two private liberal arts colleges in the state of Kentucky. So I'm humbled that Laura gets to be our speaker today as a peer. So kick it away, Laura.
Thank you, Nappy. I appreciate it. And thank you for letting me come back to Innovate today. This is actually my third Innovate conference this year. And I'm thrilled to bring you this presentation, which is Emailing Gen Z, Best Practices in this Challenging New Era. And I'm sure all of you who are in enrollment feel the word challenging very strongly right now. So we're going to walk through a little bit today. First, I do want to mention a little bit about myself, which you already know a little bit about my background. I've been a little over 12 years in higher education marketing. My background was originally in journalism, so I used to be in news editing and writing, which has come in very handy with content when it comes to email. I'm also an avid consumer of behavioral data, and I do that for our office here at Transy. So I make sure that all of our counseling team and our staff is really up to date on what is that data and that information that we need to know about our prospective students and their parents. I am also the reigning office trivia champion. I can only say that because we haven't had trivia since March, but I'm going to take it and use that as some of my influence today in my presentation. So I want to introduce you a little bit to Transylvania. You may not be familiar with us. We are not located in Romania. We are located in downtown Lexington, Kentucky. We are a small liberal arts college. In fact, we are the 16th oldest college in the country. We are the first built west of the Allegheny Mountains. And at the time, Kentucky was not a state, so you had to travel across the woods to get to our college. And hence the name, Transylvania means Latin for across the woods. As far as our academics go, we're about 1,000 students in enrollment. And our incoming student profile is fairly high. It's a 27 ACT, around a 3.6, 3.7 GPA. For those of you who are watching this and you want to know a little bit more too about our students, we're a very regional school. So we have a significant Kentucky population. We also have a significant student athlete population. We are a Division III institution, and for 1,000 students, we actually have 47% of them enrolled as a student athlete and are involved in one of 27 intercollegiate athletic teams, which seems like a lot. So our students are very involved in athletics. We have 46 majors, many pre-professional tracks. We, up to March, were Kentucky's only test optional school. That, of course, is likely going to be changing. We've been test optional for about 5 or 6 years here in Kentucky. This is year 3 with Engage. I'm just going to say now, I'm going to call it CBE at some point in time during my presentation today. And we are also a SLATE school. We are finishing our 3rd cycle with SLATE. And so you will hear me use some SLATE terms throughout this presentation today, but I'll make sure to kind of make that clear for those of you who are not SLATE users. So why Transy? Why us? When I was asked to present this a couple months ago, I asked the same thing. What is it about Transy that is making it worthwhile to do a presentation about? And so Capture shared some numbers with us that we thought were really helpful. When you look at February 2020, this is when this data was kind of presented to us. Our application pool, as far as identified students for fall fall 2020 was double that of the capture partner average. And then when you look at our admitted pool, and as far as February 2020, it was nearly double the capture partner average. This was, of course, great news to us, but also very surprising. When you look at our data now, as of June 2020, I just pulled this yesterday, we've grown even more, and we're very excited to see this. Our fall 2020 identified students for admitted students is more than double the capture partner average, as is our deposited. We are almost at 100% of identified deposited students. So we're very excited about that. And that, of course, allows us to make a lot of great decisions as an office and as a counseling team throughout the process of the college search. So typically these outcomes are at the end of presentations, but I wanted to go ahead and show you what our outcomes look like so you can see why our process is kind of working for us. So that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to walk through what our communication process looks like in developing our email communication, and it starts with research and ends with assessment. This is typically an annual cycle for us, but just know that some of these things happen continuously throughout the full cycle. Research is ongoing. We're continually inundated with white papers and new data that we continue to use throughout the cycle. And assessment, for instance, is used throughout the cycle. We're constantly doing feedback on our visits and events and other things that we do on our campus. But this is our typical research to assessment communication flow process that we start each summer and we end each summer. So let's go ahead and launch into our first step, which is our research phase. One of the most important things about the research phase for us is knowing the audience. Who is your audience? What information are they looking for? What mediums do they want to receive it in? How frequently do they want to receive it? All of this matters. And so if you can identify your audience, that's kind of the first step. For us, one of the things that really bothered us many years ago is that we were starting the conversation off on the wrong foot. We kept asking, okay, what information do we want them to know? And we're just going to push it to them. But we realized very quickly that we shouldn't be asking, what do we want them to know? We should be asking, what do they want to know? And so we try on an annual basis to ask that question. What do they want to know? What do our audiences looking for? When do they want to receive it? And then how can we align our communication to best fit our student and our parent? Because you can push the information you want to them, but if they're not interested in hearing it right then they're not going to absorb it and they're not going to be interested in it. So if you lead with that kind of strategy of providing what they are interested in at the moment, we identify our audiences. These are an example of some of the audiences we use at Transylvania. For those of you who are Slate users, you'll know the term populations. And populations are simply an umbrella term of a group of people. One unique thing you might see here is that our prospects and our inquiries are actually lumped together. When I first started in enrollment over a decade ago, we treated prospects and inquiries very differently. Prospects for us are those who are name buys that we're purchasing, and then inquiries were those who had already raised their hand. And what we would originally do is we would maybe send 5 or 6 messages to those prospects, hope to kind of get them interested and to inquire with us. And if they didn't, then we just kind of let them go and we didn't worry about communicating with them the rest of the year. However, what we're seeing at Transy, and I'm sure a lot of you are seeing as well, is that we're seeing an increase in students who are stealth applicants. So the application is the first time that we're seeing their name and they're not going through that inquiry phase. They're skipping inquiry. And the reason why is because so much is available online at their disposal. They can go to Niche and Peterson's and CapEx and all these great partner websites. They can go to your student, your own website. They can do all the research that they want to do. They can go to Google. There's all these abilities for them to be able to do the research without having to reach out to you. And frankly, this generation of students are not going to be the type to pick up the phone and call you and ask you for questions either. So they're going to do a lot of the research virtually. Because of that, we thought, you know what, we're going to treat prospects and inquiries the same. We started doing this about 4 years ago, and we've seen a great increase in our stealth pool, but being able to identify some of those students earlier. That way we're treating them the same. Now, we don't just all of a sudden bombard them with email. We do let them know that it's going to happen. So we may say, you know what, we're going to be sending you some stuff over the next few weeks that we hope that you're interested in. If not, we understand you can unsubscribe and we will not continue to send you communication. But it's really worked out for us to treat populations of prospects and inquiries exactly the same. Now, we do segment a little bit further in each of these populations. So we also are going to have legacies, high achieving students, disciples of Christ. That's what we are affiliated with here at Transy. Transfer students, application status. We will still send segmented messages to these under these larger populations of people. But the problem is if you do too many populations, you are going to start having emails that are going to be sent on different days and potentially on the same day. And the one thing you don't want to do is send 3 emails to a student in one day with maybe 3 calls to action and 3 different messages. So it's easier for us to make sure that we're not bombarding our students by having fewer large populations and segmenting within them. So the next phase is we know who they are. So now what do they want? We do a lot of data review. We do external data, and we also look at our own feedback cycles. So these are 2 things hopefully that you have in place at your institution. If you don't, I highly recommend that you start looking at your feedback cycles to make sure you're informing your own communication as you go throughout the year. I'm not going to read all of this Gen Z student data because I'm sure many of you are very familiar with this. And I will say that I have put an asterisk by our Gen Z student data for a very good reason, which you probably know why. This is pre-COVID-19 data. Now, we know that they're still going to potentially have these values and still act in these ways, but we know that it's possible that the coronavirus and the lockdown that we have been in is going to change some of their opinions and change some of these ways that they feel. But generally, if you look at a Gen Z student, they have a very global perspective. And in fact, this is more versatile now more than ever. They're very involved in social issues and social responsibility. And I think that's very evident in our society today. They have very diverse families and diverse structures. They very highly value the opinion of their parents. They also are very highly personalized. I call this kind of the Netflix effect because that's really one of the first that started. Whether it's Netflix or Amazon, they're able to get on there and rate information, and then it's able to be tailored directly to their needs. They expect colleges to be the exact same way. They're very future focused, they're entrepreneurial, and most importantly, they're very marketing savvy. So don't think that they're going to get your email and thinking that it's not marketing, because they will. And this is where authenticity is really important. Lastly, debt and employability. Now, this has always been a chief concern of them, but I can guarantee you that moving forward, it's going to be even more so. These students who have lived through something that none of us have really ever lived through before. And this is something they have learned from their Gen X parents, and I can continue to see them be concerned about in the future moving forward. But now let's talk about the Gen X parent. I personally love Gen X parents because it's a type of communication style that I really appreciate. They want transparency. They want honesty. They're a little cynical. They think everyone is kind of self-motivated. So they're going to be distrustful until you give them a reason not to be. They're always going to be looking for the fine print. And so being honest with them can really win them over. This is a conversation I have with our own campus visit team regularly, is that if a student, is curious, or a parent is curious about what's the worst thing about Transy, obviously don't be negative Nancy, but be honest with them. And honestly, even though it's a negative answer, it can actually win you points with that Gen X parent. Even if it is a 100% positive answer, being honest can actually seem like, oh, they were very honest. I now find them a little bit more trustworthy. They also really care about personal accountability. You'll see this in the emails that I will show you moving forward, but we really focus on making sure the emails are coming from people. And it's because they don't want to know that a process is going to keep your students safe. They want to know who is the point person, what is their phone number, how can I contact them. They don't want to know that there's an office of health in case your student gets sick. They're going to want to know who is the doctor, who is the APRN, when are they available, how can I contact them. They really care about personal accountability. And of course, they're very skeptical of grandiose claims. They're sensitive to prices and the value that they receive in return. And this is where Gen X parents have really influenced their Gen Z students, and they care a lot about affordability and value. So the big question really now is, how will or has COVID-19 changed these perspectives of the parents and the students? And I think this is going to be something we're going to continue to have to learn about. I know that many of you who do work in admissions may have started to receive some data already, but this is some that I've already received that I wanted to go ahead and pass along. We're seeing a lot of parents being concerned about students going away from home. They're potentially going to be pushing their children to enroll closer to home, to live at home and commute to college. They're likely going to still push their child to do virtual tours instead of going on campus, even if on-campus tours are available. Of course, 56% of junior parents are concerned that their family is able to pay for their college. So these are all going to be things that we're going to see moving forward. And I'm sure data is going to continue to be developed and sent to us in white papers and other formats over the course of the next several months. It'll be really important for you to continue to absorb this and read this as we go along, because it can really help notify you of changes that you might need to make in your communication plan as we move forward. This is from McGuire Associates. They did a lot about cities. So if those of you who are institutions in our top 20 markets, it's showing that domestic students are considering enrolling outside of those locations. They're not as interested. And parents are even more concerned about it, even in large Midwest markets like St. Louis and Chicago. A majority of parents, both students and parents, indicate that COVID-19 has not actually changed their rank order of colleges. However, it doesn't mean that they hasn't changed their thought of where they end up enrolling. So while you may not see a lot of changes in that initial process, that search process, those applications may still be coming in. It may not change their rank order of colleges, but it really may affect where they end up choosing when it comes to yield season. So all of these are really important to kind of keep in mind as you move forward with your communication plan. Now, I know that's a lot of negative information, but I thought this is a really great positive data point from EAB. They have said when they looked at their partner information, they're still reaching students' inboxes at high rates and avoiding spam filters. They're maintaining recent benchmarks. And in fact, in March 2020, in comparison to March 2019, their response rate are 17% higher than they were for the equivalent communication. So even though students, I think, are certainly having this, what I'm calling virtual fatigue, they've been working with NTI, they've been on the computer doing webinars and virtual sessions. It doesn't mean that they're less likely to open their email. And in fact, it looks like they're opening it at a little bit of a higher rate because they know that this is the information medium in which they're going to be receiving information if they can't receive it in person. So if you use all of that external data, you also need to look at your own internal data. So I'm going to show you a little bit of what we do here at Transy. One of the surveys that we do every year is a matriculated and non-matriculated student survey. So at the end of the recruitment cycle, we'll send those students a survey and just ask them, what was your process like? What are some things that were important to you in the beginning, and what was it important to you at the end? And so you'll see here in our survey, we asked, what were you most interested in learning about during your college search? 1, academic majors. 2, financial aid and scholarships. 3, post-grad jobs and graduate school success. Now, we always like to look at this external data. Is the external data really validating our own? And in fact, when we looked at RNL's national survey, it was exactly the same order. So that made us feel really confident that our data was definitely aligning with the national data. We also asked level of preference for different types of communication. This is really important. To us, this was a great news. Our email from admissions was just as preferred and highly preferred by non-matriculated and matriculated students. So this means email, yes, is still working, which is good news for us. We also asked email from faculty. Now this was surprising. They really prefer and highly prefer email from faculty. Of course, you can always ask myself how we have done this and facilitated this in the past. And we actually have some great faculty on campus. We give them a template because, if you tell a faculty member to write about their research or their academic field, they could just write paragraphs and paragraphs of information. So what we do is we provide them a template with an introduction and a closing, and we ask them to fill in about 5 to 10 sentences in the middle selling their program. And that allows us to facilitate the emails through Slate, but still come from the faculty, and then they're prepared to answer any questions that they receive from students when they are sent. Now, this one should not surprise any of you, and it did not surprise us. Phone calls from admissions was highly not preferred and not at all preferred by matriculated and our non-matriculated students. Now, What does this mean? This does not mean that we should eliminate phone calling of students. What it means is that maybe we need to reconsider when and why we are calling these students. Maybe there's other mediums that are better fit for the communication that we're trying to do. Maybe it's better fit for a text or an email. Maybe it's not a phone call. Maybe the phone calls we reserve only for the parents. So these are the conversations that a great survey like this outcome made us think about. We really hadn't considered that phone calls were really significantly going out of style for this group of students. So now we need to kind of reassess how we phone call our families. Now, this was something really important to me last year, and I think it'll probably be pretty important to you. Frequency. How frequent would you like to receive emails as a senior? And we had a very differing group of answers here for matriculated and non-matriculated students. Some of them wanted it once a week, some wanted every 2 weeks. Of course, there were others who said, just once a month. So the question is how can we meet all of these students' expectations? Do we do 2 weeks because it kind of encompasses everyone? Do we do a mix of the three and kind of vary our communication? And at Transylvania, we decided we're going to do a little bit of both. So we actually compromised all of these into a communication flow. Another thing we do internally for a feedback cycle is A/B testing. I highly recommend this. There's certainly an option to do it in Slate. We have found that subject lines that include the student's name have higher open rates. If they are from an individual, as I mentioned earlier, parents really care about that personal accountability. So if we put the student's counselor, a staff member, a faculty name, all of those had higher open rates for us than just being from the Transylvania University admissions office. We also use emojis and unique subject lines, and those would increase open rates. I do say under the right circumstances. Obviously, if we use emojis every single time, it no longer stands out. So we would use it during really important information when it was application deadlines or things that were maybe a pertinent of time. And so whenever we use those, it would certainly increase our open rates for our students. The next phase is our planning phase. So we've done all the research. Now it's time to start planning and let this data kind of lead the way. So our timeline starts typically, I want to say in May, after May 1, but of course this year has changed that. So we are actually in this process right now. We develop a full year communication plan for email, print, text, and anything in conjunction with our marketing and communications office. So I am the liaison with our marketing communications office. I will take all that data to them. We will then start our timeline and develop our full communication for the full year. Now, even though I'm a journalism background, I still need a 2 sign-off rule for content and for design before it reaches the point of scheduling. It's always good to have more than one set of eyes. I can sometimes miss conjunctions and things like that. And so it's great to make sure that we are 100% accurate, that we have 2 other people in our office that are reading and approving these emails before they are scheduled. We are also a small school on a small budget. So while we would love to have ample opportunity to merge all of our print with our email, we knew it would be really hard to do that in a days out scenario. So what we do is we group senior populations and we launch them at different times. So if a student has inquired or been a prospect up to say August 15th, then they're going to be in senior group A. If someone then is a prospect or an inquiry between August 16th and say September 1st, they would be in senior group B. That way we group our students and we launch those communication plans at the same time. And so we know exactly what day they're receiving emails, and we can exactly send those print within those email timelines. So then the week that they're getting an email about outcomes, they're actually going to also receive a print communication in their inbox, their mailbox, that is also about outcomes. So we're able to then correlate all of our print and our text and our communication all together by grouping our seniors in different groups. Organization. Now, I will say this ranges from office to office. For our counseling team, we are a Google school, so it's great to use Google Excel. Each population has a tab in our Google Excel sheet. It contains timing, subject lines, links to the emails, who it's being segmented to, what is the call to action, who is the email sender. I constantly keep this on a tab on my desktop. It very rarely ever goes away because I'm updating this on a daily basis. We use an email status that is color-coded as well. And it's distributed not only to the admissions office and our counseling team, but also to our marketing communications office. What this does is it allows them to see the messages that we're sending and when we're sending them, and they can coincide their social media messages with the messages that we're sending out into the email inboxes as well. That way, it really creates an integrated marketing campaign overall. So here's an example. Of course, this is not ours, but this is a senior campaign example of what it might look like in a Google Excel sheet for you. We have the date, how it's scheduled in our Slate system, what the content is, our call to action, who the signature line is on that email, any segmentation that might occur within that email, and then what the status is. This gives our counseling team a very quick glance. They know what emails are active, what's in progress, and what is coming up. And the best thing about this is that they can then schedule their territory management emails within these. They're not duplicating days. We're not going to have multiple messages from multiple people on a single day. Our next step is developing the content. So we're going to plan. We have done all of our research, so now it is time to launch this content. And the question I'm asked most often is, what content do you use for your senior prospects and inquiries? So we're going to use exactly what we just used, what we just developed, our external data, our survey answers. We're also going to look at what differentiates us as an institution, and what are our brand pillars. And then lastly, what do we know yields? Campus visits, being on campus, those obviously yield, but of course that might change this coming year. So what do we know is potentially going to yield in this coming year? Now, what we're going to do when we're looking ahead for this coming year, and I'm sure you are too, is we're going to double down on some key elements based on some of this new data. So we're going to continue those best practices of our email, which we'll talk about here shortly: frequency, readability, authenticity. We're going to focus significantly more on value and affordability. Concerns of finances are paramount now. Price sensitivity is increasing. So we really need to be proactive and transparent. I'm sure that all of you are getting the same questions that we are right now from our admitted and our deposited parents, which is, what is fall going to look like? What's going to happen this fall? Is my student going to be able to come on campus? They want pure transparency and information. So the more that you can provide and be proactive, the better it's going to be. So we're going to continue to move forward with that with our fall 2021 class. So when you're developing your content, we really try to keep it simple. We really watch our subject line length. 80% of our emails are opened on mobile devices. So it only shows about 25 to 30 characters of your subject line. So we try to keep them within that so we're not running off of their mobile page. We use conversational language. It does not have to be as formal as your website or your print. And we're very concise. I call this kind of snackable content. If you have too much to put in one email, it ends up being 4 or 5 paragraphs. That just means that it gives you an additional touch point. So write a second email. And bullet points are your friend. One thing that I bring back from my journalism days is called inverted pyramid style. Some of you may or may not be familiar with this. So essentially, back in the day, when they had the printing press, they only had a certain amount of space to lay out all their characters. So they might think that they're going to have space for a 500 character story, but they only end up with 300. If you write an inverted pyramid style, it actually solves all these problems. What you do is you put the most important content at the top, your second most important content, and then your least important content. So if you have to cut from the bottom, then you can, and it doesn't affect your story. So for us, we do this with our email as well. We know that students are going to look at the beginning, they're going to hit a short scroll, they're going to scroll to the bottom. So if we can catch them with that first or second line, even if they scroll through the third part, then it's okay because it's not as the important content. So you can see in this email, it was about MLK Day. We were open a couple years ago on MLK Day. We hit them with the most important information is that we're open. The second is how you can register. And third, if you want to come downtown and you want to explore and you want to be part of the Freedom March and the commemorative program, then that's available to you as well. But you know what? If they don't get to that part, that's okay because we have already told them the most important information up front. When it comes to subject lines, I wanted to give you guys some examples. These are some that we use throughout the year. Direct ones are great right now. I can tell you in COVID-19 time, we're using a lot of direct email subject lines. You're missing your application items. Here's information about our opening for fall 2020, those kinds of things. But it's also great to use other other types of subject lines. Guiding is one that we use a lot. I call those my BuzzFeed subject lines. 5 ways test prep can help you with your GPA. And occasionally questioning can really come in handy, especially towards the end of the cycle. If it's coming from a counselor, Laura, do you plan to apply? And it seems like it's a question coming directly from your counselor. In addition to keeping it simple, these are some other things that are great. Ask questions, act like a real human being, and use your CRM data to your advantage. All of our CRMs, Slate or otherwise, has a ton of data available to you. So variable data doesn't cost you any money with email, so use it to your advantage. Be yourself. Don't try to be something that you're not. We always tell students when they're writing their essays, if you're funny, be funny. If you're not funny, don't try. So don't try to be something that you don't feel represents your brand as an institution. Focus on one call to action. Don't ask them to do too much. I have seen emails that might have 3, 4 call to actions. There's 10 links in it. If you ask them to do much, they're not going to do anything at all. So really focus on one call to action for each of your emails. And of course, I told you we have a 2-step process, but check your grammar because small things can make a big impression. And I can tell you spelling out Transylvania is not exactly the easiest thing, and those letters can certainly get transposed. So make sure that your grammar and all of that is completely up to date and is accurate before you send your emails. Lastly, be fun. Email can be less formal than your website and print. Be funny when it's warranted. We use GIFs when it's relevant, and I'll show you how we do that. Design. We actually update our design pretty regularly at Transy. We will be doing that this summer as we have a new website launching in July. And so we want to make sure that our brand is being represented the same, whether they're looking at print or they're looking at email or they're looking at our website. For us, we care about being clean and interesting. So we designed number 1 for mobile. I told you a majority of our students are opening everything on their devices. So we have a mobile first approach. This is how I design all of them. I very rarely look at that desktop version. We try to give them variety in their emails. So not every email looks the same. It will look a little different. One might highlight a video. One might be a question and answer with an alum. It might be a pull quote from a current student. Make sure that you have alt text. So if a student is using a text to voice on their phone, it will still use the information that you have in your photographs and other things to tell them what is present visually that they may not be able to see themselves. Also, not emails need visuals. So while this is an example of one of our emails, some of the most opened emails from our counselors have no templated design at all. It actually looks like they're just sending it straight from their Gmail account, even though it might be a mass email that I'm sending on behalf of all of the counselors. One thing that we have tried several years is moving our buttons around. Our call to action buttons actually change according to the status of the student. So if they are in the prospect phase, it might be located in one place. If it is later in the admit or deposit, we might move that button up. So it's great to do this A/B testing to help you decide where are the best locations for our buttons. Also, avoid important content in your images. Kentucky is a really interesting state because we do have vast differences in our socioeconomics from the eastern side to the western side of the state. We know that in the eastern part of Kentucky that we don't have as many students that are on unlimited data plans. We know that a lot of them are more on pay-as-you-go, and so they may not download those images immediately on their phones. So if they're not downloading the images, if there's anything important in them, those students aren't going to receive it. So we want to always make sure that we don't put any important information in that image that if a student does not see it, that they're not missing out on anything. And lastly, of course, the whole important part of this is that you are identifying your students. So don't forget to put your engage links in your different links that you're putting in your buttons. This is going to make sure that they're sending them to your website, they're being identified, and then you're able to use that information to better give your counseling team the information that they need to help make decisions. Lastly, assessment is your friend. It's great to learn, to use it, and to move on. And we assess all year round, but this is one point in time in which we use a lot of assessment to make decisions for the coming year. So you may need to ask yourself, what emails are performing poorly or well? What have the lowest open rates, the lowest click-through rates? What have the highest? And maybe why is it that that email has performed so well? What is it? Is it the subject line? Is it the content? the timing, the design, this is a great opportunity then to use your A/B testing. You can have a couple of theories, roll it out there, and see really what works for your populations of students. Now, when it comes to me every year, I have a 70-20-10 strategy for my emails. 70% is what I know works. Luckily, we've been doing this process for about 4 years at Transy, and so we know our majority of our emails are working well. But we always like to try something new. 10% of what my new emails are every year is just taking a chance and trying something different that we've never tried before. And obviously, a great opportunity is if you work in enrollment marketing, is to look at other colleges, see what they're sending, sign up as prospective students. I had a friend that used to sign up their dog as a prospective student to get an idea of what is everyone else doing. And the great thing about the Slate community and also the Capture community is that we're all very into sharing information with one another. So try something new and exciting every year. If it's just 10% of your email and it doesn't work, then it doesn't affect overall your communication flow, but at least it could potentially be a great success and something that you're doing that another college is not doing. So for us, this is from February 2020, so it is not completely updated, but you can look at our population open rates. So this is based on data from the past 2 years. We have fairly high open rates for our sophomores, our domestic seniors, goes up incredibly for our international students in both the senior and the admit phases. Our senior parents have their own comp flow and they're opening it at 30%. And our deposit is starred because it hadn't launched and been going very long at the point when this data was taken. But now it is actually up significantly from 41%. Another thing that we look at is time of day and day of the week. So we found that our average best times for email are after 4:00 p.m. Eastern time, and that the average best days for our emails are Wednesdays and Thursdays, and the third is Friday. The ones we always avoid are weekends and Mondays. They tend to have really full inboxes, and so they're not as likely to see our email. But these are great things that you can look at for your own institution, dig into that Slate data, dig into your CRM data, and see what days and weekdays are really performing well for you. So now you can kind of see the full circle of what our communication flow process looks like, from research to planning to content to design and all the way down to assessment. This is a continual cycle. We never stop on this. And throughout the year, we even will assess it, midway through. Maybe it's December and an email we thought was going to be that 10% was going to be awesome, just is not performing well. We may call an audible mid-year and we'll assess it then and make some changes. So don't think that you have to keep to this process in this order, but it's certainly something that you can do to continually inform you and your recruitment team of communication and getting those students identified. So hopefully this information has been really helpful for you today. Like I said, this has been a 4-year process of developing this at Transylvania, and it's worked very well for us. Please feel free to connect with me online. I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Recruiter Rudy, or you can email me directly at lrudolph@transy.edu. And Lynn and the Capture team, thank you so much for having me today, and let me know if there's any questions.
Thanks so much, Laura. That was fantastic. I feel like every time I hear you speak, I learn something new, even after 20 years of doing enrollment management, both behind the desk and with Capture. It never surprises me when I don't know. So thank you for bringing all of those wonderful insights together. I'm looking through and scrolling through questions that are being posed in different areas. Len?
I do have a question. Laura, one of the things you said in the beginning was talking about just the different populations and just being mindful about how much segmentation you do. It's something that we wrestle with all the time, the level of segmentation. Do you find, now having done this for 4 years, is there one population that perhaps later in the funnel, you always make sure it is highly segmented? And if so, why is that? Because we get asked on many occasions in the top of funnel to have very grand segmentations and complex workflows and if-thens, and be curious to see based upon your analysis, late stage, do you then adjust, and if so, where?
That's a great question. So one of the things that we have noticed at the point of admission and forward, particularly the admitted student phase, that's really when finances become critical. And so we really start narrowing down our students based on maybe their EFC, their expected family contribution from their FAFSA. So maybe there is a family who really needs a little bit more money. Maybe they really need to hear from someone else about that value message. So one thing I can always recommend is, parents love to hear from other parents, students love to hear from other students. And so one thing that we're going to be implementing this coming year is getting some current parents involved in that process. So if we can segment a little bit more to the families who have been here, have maybe a high EFC, they understand value, but they're not willing to necessarily pay for it. Then maybe we can connect them with someone who is of a similar EFC when they came to Transy, and they can talk about why they decided to choose it and why they found that value and affordability really mattered when it came to the outcomes that they would get as a Transy student. So we do a lot of financial kind of segmentation when it comes to that point of admission, because we're finding that is the most critical point. Earlier on, it's, legacies, right? It's trying to get people involved. Application status early is really important, but by the time of admission, that really changes when their priorities shift. So I would actually recommend any schools who are thinking about that if they are putting out these surveys like we are, they can add those questions in that say, at the point of admission, what were the most important things for you to make your decision? And that's actually a question that we ask. Outcomes are also really big for us. So we will often segment too on academic major, but we'll focus on the outcome portion at the yield stage. So that is another way that we segment kind of post-admit.
Sure. Laura, one of the things that I love that you all do is not just developing communications that you think is important to the institution to get to the students and their families, but moreover to understand the needs of the students at different times. As you have done this survey through the years, have there been any major changes in the needs of the students and how they want to be communicated with? That's question one. And question two is, what has been the most surprising thing that you've learned?
I would say, when I started this a little over a decade ago, we were really dealing more with baby boomers and millennials. They acted very differently than Gen X and Gen Z, and just the things that they were interested in. Particularly parents, I think, had the greatest shift. In fact, I worked at Transy for a couple of years. I left. I returned to Transy. I call it my sabbatical from Transy. When I came back, that shift had kind of happened during that time. And so when I came back, I had originally had this parent communication flow. I actually ditched the whole thing. It was written very much for the boomer audience. And frankly, they really enjoyed the the more high-end things about Transy, the fluff. Like, they were okay with marketing fluff. Baby boomers really were. We talked a lot about our Tempur-Pedic mattresses in our dorm rooms, the rock walls that are in, the gymnasiums and things. You could talk about those things with the baby boomers, and they really loved it. But the Gen X parent, they are not swayed by the flashy things. They just want honesty, transparency, get to the point. Tell me exactly what I need to know. And it's actually been really fun to rewrite the communication for those parents, because I appreciate that. I appreciate that they just want us to get straight to the point. And I think the more honest with them you are, as I mentioned, even if it's a little negative, they're going to trust you more. So really, I've seen more of a shift in the parent than I have in the student. Although the student being more socially interested and responsible in social issues have become more, and diversity has become more important to those groups of people, that has also changed kind of our focus in showing them how they can be entrepreneurial on our campus and they can make an impact on our campus. So that's kind of the language and the messages that have changed a little bit for the student.
That's fantastic. Has there been anything just wild and weird that you learned in the feedback from students of what they want to know?
I don't think there was anything that was significant. I think we weren't too surprised by the phone calls.
Sure.
Certainly. I was a little surprised. I remember when texting really first became a thing in admissions, is that we were so scared to send text messages to students because we're like, we're invading their personal space. That has just changed completely. if they're okay with receiving it, they would much rather text you than to email you or call you. So that has been a bit of a surprise because I feel like that change happened very quickly. So we're relying much more now on texting than we had ever in the past, when we were really afraid that we were kind of bombarding their personal space.
Yeah. Len?
Yeah, Laura, it seems like with a number of the initiatives you do, it's well thought out. You map it back to metrics. Can you share with us one experiment? You said 10% of the time it's kind of an experiment that performed so well, you were like, oh my goodness. And can you share with us the experiment where you thought it was going to go really well and it was just did not resonate? We're like this. And then why? Why do you think one outperformed? And what was some of so we can, share those lessons learned?
Great question. So one of the things that we tried one year that I was more than thrilled with the outcome was a Spotify playlist. So we had not really ever thought about integrating other virtual experiences into the email communication flow. And so we are Transylvania, which means Halloween is huge on our campus. So we actually have a Halloween visit week. We have, for those of you who want to look this up, we have a tomb in our administration building that does have 2 bodies in it. So we do a tour of the tomb during Halloween. We have what's called Pumpkin Mania here in Lexington. It's a really big week for us. And so we thought, why not send prospective students a great crafted Halloween playlist through Spotify, encouraging them to come to campus. And we actually, additionally, in addition to that, we did a print application reminder that was also kind of themed for Halloween, and it took off. So we actually started doing more of these Spotify playlists for different reasons. So we have one for spring break, graduation, and we actually it's one of the few things we receive emails back on that people actually said, like, thank you for this playlist. And it's just, that's an unusual thing to get responses like that from a big, general mass email. Mm-hmm. So that's one that has been really successful for us. As far as one that hasn't performed super well, I hate to say that one doesn't really come to mind, but I think there's some times where we think, oh, this segmented one is going to do great, and it just flops. So for instance, for us, one that has continually flopped is when we focus on our Disciples of Christ population. And I think while it's part of the student experience, that they aren't going to choose a school because it's a Disciples of Christ school when it comes to Transy. They care a lot about that as far as they're part of their personal experience, but they really care about the outcomes and what they're paying for. So some of those segmentation just hasn't worked the way that we really anticipated them working.
Sure. One of the greatest challenges that I've heard from our partners, and I think this is an obvious statement, that over the last several months with COVID and the state of affairs and all of the things that are changing right now on our campuses or virtual campuses, right? Talk to us a little bit about some of the changes that you and your team have had to make in lieu of the pandemic and being responsive to your students and families.
We have made a lot of changes. I do also manage our campus visit experience as part of my position. So that includes our campus visit team, our ambassador team, our tour guides. For any of you who are in campus visit, it has really upended what we do. And at Transylvania, being a small school, we rely a lot on yield by getting their feet in the ground here on our campus. In fact, I have just completed 4 focus groups over the past month or 2, and a majority of them have said, I was considering this other school until I came to campus. And so, of course, for me, hearing that, it's exciting, but it's also concerning, because now if we don't have that outlet for them, how do we convince them if they can't have their boots on the ground here on our campus? So we have really had to switch over to a completely virtual environment. Now, Transy is not a virtual school. We did not have online classes. We never have had online classes. So it was a major shift for our university to go online. It wasn't something that we have done previously. And so we were not just behind when it came to online courses, but also being able to do it for a campus visit perspective. Now, we lucked out. We have a great relationship with Student Bridge. We had just launched our Student Bridge interactive video tour in February. Now, we just barely got it in time. So that really made a big difference for us. We were able to at least have videos. What we also did is we quickly brought some of our student ambassadors to campus, and we did a video walkthrough of campus, and we are able to do that. We're also in the midst of doing a self-guided tour app, also through Student Bridge. So we know that students, one of the data points actually said 58% of junior parents are considering not doing in-person visits even when they are become available. They're still going to push their student to virtual. And so we know that students, families might want to come to campus, but they may not want to come as an official visit. So we're going to encourage them to come in the evenings and on the weekends and have this GPS guided tour that allows them to hear the audio of the tour guide, see the videos, see the pictures, even though they may not be able to get into some of the facilities. They'll still be able to access our bookstore, which will be public, give them coupon to be able to go to that location just like they would on a campus visit. And of course, we know it's not the campus visit, right? It's not what we want it to be, but whatever we can do to get their feet on the ground is going to be most important to us. And communicating that through email is incredibly important. That's where we have used a lot of our direct subject lines in our emails lately, because we just want to get to the point, tell the student exactly this is what they can expect. And we're trying to be as communicative as possible, but trying also not to overdo it. I mentioned virtual fatigue. It is real. We're already seeing that with our online webinars and events we've been doing for students. We have about a 50% show rate because it's just really easy to no-show a virtual webinar. So we're trying to be cognizant that they're on their laptops and their phones a lot. But at the same time, we want to make sure they're getting the information they're getting. We've had great feedback so far in our surveys. So we're going to continue to certainly push email, and luckily they're still reading it. So that makes us very fortunate for the future, that even though we're not able to get them here, we're still going to be able to connect with them through email.
That's awesome. Thank you. Lynn, do you have any last questions?
I just have one last question. I think this would be great for the audience, as we do have a few hundred people probably in your position. We keep talking about like the output, the communications. Can you talk about, for your staff, what's been the biggest change that you'd say, hey, for all you leaders out there, I want you to think about this when working with your staff as you're implementing these new, communication schemas or these new assessments, if there's anything you can share. Absolutely. I know I just put you on the spot because that wasn't really the tenor of the presentation, but I mean, you were able to adapt, and probably because you were able to communicate with your team, and any insight would be helpful.
No, it's a great question. And I think every office is a little bit different when you're trying to implement something that is such a significant part. I mean, if you look at our overall communication plan for all of our segments, you're looking at over 250 emails over the course of a year. That's a lot of email. It's a lot of email going here and there. It's a lot for the counselors to keep up with. But the most important thing is keeping an open line of communication. There is never a point in time in which our counseling team does not know what's being sent and when. And if there's a gap in time, I even try to be proactive and sending them an email and say, here's our upcoming communication. Just be aware this is what's being sent. What's also really important is that transition between the point of admission to deposit, when all of a sudden a bunch of other campus offices are also getting involved into the communication. And that overlap is really important. We're very lucky that we have a great relationship with our student life team, and they're able to notify us and put on our communication flow when other offices are sending communication as well. So it's not just like an office joint project. It kind of falls across the campus at different times of the year. So it's much bigger than that. I think also the most important thing is getting your counselors involved and really delineating what is territory management, what should be put on the major communication flow, what medium is best for this message. Because sometimes you might think an email is the best, but maybe a text message is totally sufficient. Or the same thing with a phone call. Maybe instead of phone calling, we're going to send them a schedule and say, set up a virtual time to meet with your counselor about your financial aid package instead of sending them a text message. So it's also kind of having that communication overall with your counseling team to help delineate what messages should go when, who they should go to, what the medium is the best for them, and what might be considered more the marketing side and what might be considered more territory management. So they kind of know what their expectations are too as a territory manager for their own counselors.
Fantastic. Laura, again, thank you so much. As I've been reading through the comments that are coming through, there are lots of props to you, valuable content that I think many will take away to their own campuses. So thank you again for joining us today. We truly appreciate it.
Nabby, Heather, thank you so much. It's great to join you guys today.
Take care, Laura.
Take care, Laura.
Let's move into the next giveaway, shall we, Nap?
We shall.
Let's do it. So up on the screen, we have our next giveaway, which is a $50 Netflix gift card. Once again, we will be matching that value with a donation to the Boys and Girls Club of America. I don't know about you, but if you haven't gone on to capture.buzz/donate yet, during Laura's session, I just went in and submitted my donation. Please do. We'll be matching those donations throughout the entirety of the conference up to $5,000. Let's see who is going to get this Netflix gift card. Congratulations, Pam L. from Minnesota. Pam, we will be in touch with you after the session today and to work through the logistics of getting that gift card to you. Len, we have some really exciting conversations coming up. I'm going to pass it over to you to lead us into the next session.
Great. Thank you, Heather. The next session is actually maximizing your CRM to deliver on increasing online engagement. And this is actually one of our partner presentations. So the Executive Vice President of Platform Q, Gail Rogers, along with one of our senior directors, in fact, our Senior Director of Strategic Partnerships, Amanda Scott, are actually going to lead this session. So with that, I am delighted to turn over Amanda. Amanda and Gail, welcome to the first day of Innovate 2020. And with that, I turn it over.
Thank you, Nappy. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for attending Innovate USA. My name is Amanda Scott. I'm a Senior Director here at Capture, and I work to build strategic partnerships with synergistic higher ed companies, such as Platform Q Education, to maximize our partner success through integration of technology and partnership. Today, it's my pleasure to introduce you to Capture's partner, Platform Q Education, along with today's speaker and my friend, Gil Rogers. Gil is the Executive Vice President of Platform Q Education, the leading provider of virtual event strategy and software in higher ed. Gil is a former admissions officer, so he sat on your side of the desk, and he has served at numerous capacities at the University of Hartford and the University of New Haven in Connecticut. He was the Director of Marketing at CHEG and InterCCUA prior to joining the crew at Platform Q Education last year. So thank you, Gil, for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Amanda.
Absolutely. So first, I want to give you guys an overview of how our platforms work together and why we decided to be friends in the industry. So what we're always looking out for is how to help our partners be able to maximize their enrollment efforts. And we know that being able to combine our platforms is a good way for them to use their resources to recruit students. So you can see on your screen an example here. We use Platform Q, their software Conduit, and Engage, Capture's marketing automation, in order to increase attendance at virtual and on-demand events through promoting events through dynamic content. You can see an example of this on your screen with Eckerd College. Capture's dynamic content is interfacing with a prospect to entice them to check out the on-demand content. So you can see that on the left in the center, there is a little pop-up coming in the middle of their screen while they're on the Eckerd College website, and that's coming from Engage. That then pushes the visitor to go over to similarly branded, institutionally branded platform that is on Conduit. That is Platform Q's Education's platform for on-demand and live content. And that is where the visitor can then engage with that content to help give them the right message at the right time when they're on your website. So not only can we help increase attendance by working together at online events, which are becoming more and more popular, we also have the ability to establish the return on investment that Nappy was talking about earlier. we can build in the background with Engage. We're tracking the visitor as they're on the Eckert website while they're on the Conduit platform to be able to have a seamless profile in the background so that the admissions officer can then reach out to that student at the right time and also provide a return on investment of the digital assets from digital advertising to virtual events so that you can see what enticed that individual to take that next step in their enrollment journey. So without further ado, I'm going to pass the baton on to Gil so he can talk to us about building on the topic of a CRM. How can you increase your online engagement with the tools that you currently have now? How can you work with what you have to make it even better? So Gil, take us off.
Thanks again, Amanda, and I really appreciate you joining the introduction. That was really helpful to lay the groundwork today. I feel like we have about 20 minutes, so I'm going to give you the highlights now. If I follow Laura's recommendation on most important, next important, and everything else, using your CRM is important. Leveraging data is important. Online events are going to be increasingly important. Thank you for joining my TED Talk. So with that in mind, we'll get into the specifics on how some of those things work. Like Amanda mentioned, I've had an enrollment background working at the University of New Haven, University of Hartford in Connecticut prior to coming to the ed tech consulting side. I've been at Platform Q for about 2 years. And one of the reasons why I came to Platform Q is because up until coming here, my experience has been a lot in recruitment at the institutional level, and then also demand generation and marketing. So, advertising, lead generation, and what to do with those leads afterwards is something that Platform Q and Capture do really well together. And so what I'm going to talk about today is how do we align and kind of stack these different activities and programs on top of the workflows and processes that we're building in our CRM, whether it's Slate or TargetX or Ellucian or whatever that platform is. For those who are not familiar, here's my one slide about Platform Q. The company's been around for about 15 years. Our focus has always been on developing online engagement strategies and execution. So what does it look like to build, promote, and execute an online program, from integrating it into your overall recruitment process to building the marketing plan to drive activities to those events. So like Laura mentioned earlier, when we think about an email marketing campaign, what we want to avoid are multiple blasts to the same database in a same week, month, et cetera, on similar topics or worse, conflicting topics. So by aligning ourselves and integrating our programs into your overall flow helps with ensuring that we provide consistent performance and consistent opportunities. I think one thing that the current situation has required us to do is really rethink our overarching recruitment campaign, and digital and online engagement is no longer a side of the desk project, but it's a strategic imperative for our institutions. So, just a kind of a historical perspective, and this leads back from the opening session. When we think about the way that we go about filling our class, 20 years ago, it was pretty simple, right? We knew that we wanted to get a certain amount of students in our enrolling class. Yes, we had some strategic priorities around the mix of that class, but ultimately, if we knew what our conversions were from yield rate to admit rate and up the funnel, we could back into a number of names that we would need to buy from a list provider, and obviously we would travel to locations and be a part of that program. But what we've experienced over the past 5 years, and even most recently the past 5 weeks, is that the way that students connect with our institutions continues to evolve. Right, search is still there, but like we've talked about before, the large list purchases may be a little bit of a challenge given testing providers are limited right now, right? Even survey providers are limited right now with access to groups of students. And what we've seen over the past 5 years or so, even with the automation that can come and streamlining of processes that can come from a great CRM system, whichever system that you choose, the number of applications that an institution has had to generate per enrollment has doubled over the past 5 years. So that means that we're doing double the amount of work for the same net result when it comes to filling our class, right? And so there has to be more that we can do to alleviate summer melt, get more completed applications, focus on getting more enrollments out of our admit pool. Many institutions that I've worked with over the past few years don't necessarily need more applications. They would love more applications because it helps with selectivity, it helps with broader other enrollment priorities, but they don't necessarily need more applications. They need more completed applications. So, again, one of the things that we focus on with our partners is how do we develop a plan that gets more of those students who start the application but don't submit it, or submit an application and are missing materials, to progress through that process. So, obviously to get through that challenge, we have our own subset of challenges, right? We know that to do this, we're going to have to generate more content, make it available across multiple channels. This conference is being broadcast across multiple channels. So as we're developing our content, it's not just email, it's not just text, but it's email and text and advertising and webcasting. And how do we connect these things together with like building blocks to really to make a program that fits the needs of our students? Now, with that said, it's easy to say, but how do we do that when we also don't have more hours in our day, especially right now when we're probably juggling our home, family, health, etc., and also not getting any more budget in our more budget for recruitment, right? I think many of our partners are facing the reality and the challenge of they'll likely have a reduction in marketing. So it's even going to be even more important to be able to do more with less when it comes to our recruitment and marketing challenges. One of the ways we're going to be able to address that, as particularly the budget issue, is looking at our legacy summer and fall tactics, which oftentimes have high costs, right? Recruitment events and programs, travel, ballroom presentations in geographic markets, the cost of just the fuel and the food for recruiting staff when they're traveling. All of these things add up. And if we get to a situation where high schools aren't able to offer opportunities for college reps to come in during the day for safety concerns, valid safety concerns, we get to a situation where fall college fairs are no longer in person, there's going to be a necessary reduction in use of funds for things like travel. So we have the opportunity to shift to some things, leveraging data within our CRM, using the tools and resources to create personalized content to support students throughout the process. And that I think is the most important element to think of here when we're developing our plan, is how do we move from our legacy tactics to online programs? And obviously back in April, when everybody had to get their admitted student programs online all at the same time, some of us used Zoom, some of us used Conduit, some of us used YouTube. There's a variety of different programs and resources that you can build. And many of us felt we were very successful regardless of what program we used, because we all pulled together. We had IT resources, marketing resources, data resources, the admission staff, everyone was all hands on deck. If we fast forward to the fall, there's going to be a significantly different set of circumstances. Faculty are going to need IT resources if there's more distance learning programs that are put in place. You're going to have, social distancing, keeping students coming from campus potentially. And even if we have a vaccine tomorrow, there's going to be concerns about travel and about safety and those sorts of things. So we need to be prepared in that element to support students. Now, with all of that said, addressing these challenges can be a challenge in and of itself, right? We all go through staff turnover. We all struggle with integrating our tools and resources together. We might have standalone one-off solutions for our online outreach. Our virtual tour is on one platform. Our chat widget is run by another platform. Our webinar platform is another platform. We host everything on social media. These things are all disconnected across from each other, and it makes it difficult to really measure outcomes and make it a manageable process. So it's important and this is, again, to kind of reinforce what Amanda said at the beginning, it's important for us to think about how we have these things talk to each other. How can we leverage and measure what should be measured through the process? And I know we said earlier, not everything that can be measured should be measured, but how do we ensure everything that should be measured can be measured and measuring it effectively? So the best analogy I have to this is, for anyone who raises kids, you've probably seen this type of situation. Now, full disclosure, my kids picked up yesterday, so Amanda sent me these pictures of her kids' Legos, just so we had it for this presentation. But this is what your living room might look like, or your kids' playroom might look like. And Legos are great because they allow you to either use a standardized plan to build a program or build a tower or whatever it is, or you can be creative and make up your own stuff and do both. And there is no wrong way when it comes to that. But at the end of the day, left on the floor, it looks like a disorganized mess, right? So I think everybody can probably agree that one of the unsung heroes of the Lego sets is the green grass square, or maybe the tan sand square, or the blue water square. And the reason why this piece is the unsung hero is it provides the firm foundation that whether you're building something out of a set or making something up on your own, it has a solid foundation to live on wherever you're building it, right? And so think about the green grass of a Lego set as your enrollment marketing plan, right? You can have the best CRM system, you can have the best webcasting platform, the best analytics or marketing automation platform. Without a plan, they're useless software, right? So it starts with developing a plan for what are our strategic priorities and how do we leverage those tools. Then once we have that plan, we can build beautiful and creative things like the set that you see here. It shines, it's amazing, it's wonderful. Now, the reality is that enrollment marketing plans don't necessarily have a instruction manual, right? We don't get given a flip by flip book of what goes where, how many names specifically we need to buy, what our ad buy needs to look like, what our cadence of webinars needs to be. Everything is unique and different. So oftentimes you'll end up with a plan that looks with an enrollment plan that might look like this. This is something that doesn't have an instruction book with it, but it looks pretty awesome, right? It came together and did what you needed it to do. So everyone is unique and everyone is different. So everybody's plan is going to come out different. So when we think about building out our plan and leveraging our tools and resources, it's important for us to go beyond thinking about the CRM and thinking more about CEM or customer engagement management. And what we mean by that is not replacing your CRM. CRM is a necessary piece to store data, to automate processes, to report on processes, do mass communications and programs, even personalized communications. But what CEM is a process of thinking about. It's everything a CRM is not, right? It's the ability to take the data that you acquire through a variety of sources, whether it's lists, web traffic activity, online event programs, et cetera, and maximizing the use of that data and your content to drive conversions. So think of it like a Lego piece on top of the Lego pieces, right? So you have your Lego set on top of your firm foundation, and you have your programs that then get the best results. So if I think of CEM in 3 steps, what I kind of go to is thinking about step 1, establishing enrollment plan. So what is your green grass foundation? You identify your goals and challenges. You set your key objectives. You build that foundation and really focus on goals before tools, right? Like I said before, you can have the greatest suite of tools in your toolkit as you want. You can have the best marketing firm to help you with developing your comm plan. If you don't have a solid plan in place to guide that, everything is going to fall apart. Your Lego tower will not be firm and everything will fall to the ground. The next is then looking at what pieces do you need, right? Just like in a Lego kit, you have the summary of all the pieces that are required. Again, we don't have that for an enrollment plan, but we do know that even the best CRM system doesn't do it all. You know, if you're a Salesforce user, you know that's why the Salesforce App Exchange exists. There's the ability to customize that platform for your own needs and add modules and programs depending on what your priorities are. Your CRM may be great out of the box. You might have, the Slate community loves Slate because it's a great out of the box solution. But there are probably things that it doesn't do that you need it to do. Or maybe it does some things you need it to do and it doesn't do them well enough for you to go it alone, right? We mentioned before about things like webcasts, right? Anybody can host a one-off webinar with a tool, but how do we build a plan around that to market it effectively, promote it effectively the day of, drive the best attendance, stream it across the right platforms to reach our audience? And those are all part of that establishing the pieces that we need. And then finally, this is when we integrate and execute on these overall pieces. So using the data that we have from our CRM, where our students are, demographic data, historical activity, predictive models. These are all things that we have that should follow a student throughout their life cycle within our system. Use that data and content sources to reach your audience and capture more data, right? So the more that we know about our audience, the better we can support them through the process. You would want to have a different outreach to a student who just attended a virtual event versus a student who was casually browsing your virtual tour, right? And so there's ways that those things can happen. And in enrollment management, we know that layering approaches is best, right? So when we think about that student life cycle, there's, prospect through alumni. if we think about the CRM and things like search engine optimization and data capture, these are all ways that we can align data to inform travel, email, direct mail, phone, and benchmarking for future classes. Then we think about the Lego pieces that we add on top of that CRM activity, right? Digital advertising. How are we going to develop and reuse those resources? You don't use one platform one service to advertise everywhere, because YouTube is different than Twitter, right? So there's different platforms to advertise on and leverage. How you do that is up to you, which Lego piece you decide to use. Texting, chatbots. Again, these are things that might be, more useful later in the funnel. Put that Lego piece on to build that wall. And then finally, of course, adding things like webcasting, streaming, chats, enhancing your models, enhancing your engagement metrics, incorporating, like Amanda mentioned, the data from your web activity to identify more of your prospects and build better follow-up communications. If we're successful in layering these communication channels to boost conversion and yield, then of course everything is awesome. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Amanda to see if we have any questions or more conversation.
This is the fun part about working with you, Gil, is that my face ends up on a Lego and I had to take pictures of my basement for you. So thank you for teaching us with such visual triggers that will remind us how to build on our CRMs.
Thank you for being you. That's all I have to say.
Well, thank you for coming here today to Innovate USA, Gil, and sharing information about Platform Q and Conduit and how we've already built the technology for our partners to utilize. So if you're a current partner and you use both platforms already, just reach out to us and we'd be happy to help you build campaigns so that they work seamlessly together. At that point, I don't have any questions at this point. If anyone has any questions, feel free to throw them in one of the chat lines and we will answer it for you.
Hey guys. Gil, thank you so much. That was awesome. I feel like over the last couple of months, there are very few channels that I haven't seen you on talking. And so
a good thing or a bad thing? I'm not sure.
The Lego thing was cool. It was a fantastic visual. Thank you so much for that. Lynn, do you have any questions for Gil and Amanda before we roll to the next?
I'd be curious just from Gil, with across your client base, what's the one thing that you would have said that you have learned, or where the greatest adjustment has been, and which one had the greatest impact of all the different adjustments that you've seen?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that one of the things that everybody tried to do or wanted to do in April was immediately move their admitted student event, their in-person event, online, right? And don't blame them, because that's what they wanted to do, right? But what we found is that the most success came from the institutions that understood that you can't completely duplicate the in-person on-campus events in a virtual environment. It's not about an 8-hour, 9-hour webinar. It's about a series of content, right? And you all understand that, which is why your conference is in the format that it's in, right? So it's understanding that you can't ask a high school student to sit in front of a computer for 8 hours. You can farm them around. Or an adult. You can farm them around your campus for 8 hours, because you give them a t-shirt when they check in, you give them a bagel at the cafeteria, you give them lunch. So when they're on campus, it's easier, right? Mm-hmm. But when they're watching an online environment, if they get bored, they click the X, they walk away, they're gone forever, right? And so UC Berkeley, University of Washington, University of Connecticut, they moved from a full day program or to a week-long program, and that made the same net amount of work for their team, because it's the same content, it's just spreading it out, and then it's the effective marketing of that content via email, text, website to drive that activity. And I think that's something we're going to see heading into the fall, is there's going to be a need for, virtual programming is not going to go away. It's going to be how you do it that is the differentiator, and it's being more strategic about it is what's most important.
Sure. Gil, we've got a question from Mark, and I think that's a nice follow-on from where you started. As we think about virtual programming post-COVID, right, in our Reenergize and our restore phases, how do you see institutions integrating this into the new normal?
I think you hit the nail on the head with the word integrating, right? I feel like there's, once we start doing something in higher ed, it doesn't stop. We don't move away from it. We find a way to fit it in. When we started sending emails, we didn't stop sending letters. We reformulated how, ideally we reformulated. Sometimes we don't, and that's a whole separate conversation. But we ideally find a way to layer these things together, connect the Lego pieces so that we have a concise set, right? And so in the fall, there will be, no matter what happens, there will be families who have concerns about the safety of travel. Campuses may be limited to group sizes. High schools may be limited to access. So we're going to find ways to incorporate virtual program, whether it's live or on demand. Laura mentioned, incorporating content into a virtual tour. Virtual tours by their nature are a little bit static. So how do we add live elements to those to provide that engagement opportunity? These are all things that we're thinking of, and we're talking to partners about now, right? Because we need to be ahead of this. You can't start thinking, and this is the tweetable thing, you can't start thinking about your fall recruitment program in August. Start thinking about it in June, because now we have time to adapt and evolve. We all had to be all hands on deck in April. We had no choice. We do have a choice in how long we put off incorporating online programming into our overall plan.
Fantastic.
Gil, I can build on that just a little bit.
Build.
So think about
extending the pun.
So think about right now, I never ordered groceries online, but then I had to order groceries online. So now I will continue to order groceries online because I see how nice it is. And if we're starting to do these virtual events for students when they're sophomores and juniors in college, you can't just cut them off when they're seniors, because they're like, oh, well, it was so easy to be able to interact with that college and learn about that college. So I think that we are all adjusting to the life of takeout and self-service, and that expectation is not really going to go away when we're allowed to go out without our mask on. So that's my take on it.
I didn't get the way I am by not embracing takeout. That's all I have to say about that. But yeah, I mean, to that point, right? It's that whole element of, to the student perspective, it's just standard operating procedure, right? This is just a way that we do it. I think the fear has always been, and I know we're over my time, I'm sorry. The fear has always been that we do online programming, it's going to pull away students from visiting campus, right? That's always been kind of the pushback of that tactic. Students have been moving their campus visit back for the past couple of years now because of cost, because they don't want to visit a school, fall in love with it, and not get in, right? And so the online events, just like niche and CapEx and the college searches filter colleges from the discovery phase, online programs help filter colleges on the list, right? And so so students are gonna move to later in the process, no matter what you do. So it's up to you to adapt and provide that program. So to Mark's question on the comments, that's the place where these things fit, is consistent support throughout the process. Academic overview sessions, application workshops, financial aid. These are things that students typically would come to campus for, or their high school visit. And a good high school visit isn't a sales pitch by the admissions counselor. It's an application workshop. It's a financial aid workshop. Mm-hmm. Those are the types of things that the leaders are going to be the ones who produce and leverage that content.
Sure. And the beautiful thing about this, Gil, is Nap and I are controlling the time, so we're good.
Starbucks gift card for you guys.
One question for you, and I think we've had this conversation multiple times, but I think it's an important one. As you think about all of the resources that Platform Q brings to the table, and in the work that we have done together, where do you see the synergy? Where do you see the most value for individuals as you think about virtual engagement and behavioral intelligence?
Totally. Yeah. So, and in fairness to you, Heather, this conversation usually happens like at your party at NACAC. So it's okay if you don't fully remember all of it. The way I kind of see it, the benefit that I see here with the combination of your platform and Conduit is that we have the ability now to identify more students earlier in the process, track activity on a platform that wasn't tracked before, right? My feeling is, based on the data we've seen from the clients that we've done work together on, is attendance in an online program, whether it's a webcast or a chat, whether it's live or on demand, consuming that content is a highly predictive indicator of progression through the process. And that's something that was not seeable before because the things didn't talk to each other, right? So the fact that we talk to each other is phase one, right? And then it's, how do we maximize outcomes for the student by providing them with meaningful engagement opportunities, right? And that's when we do creative refreshes with toaster ads and all those sorts of elements, driving to a live program if it's live that day. If a school has a virtual open house on June 14th, if a student lands on that school's website, it should say virtual open house live today, click here to join, right? These are things that are enabled because of this program, which by default makes the creative refreshes more dynamic because the virtual programs are live and changed throughout the year. So it makes that content more dynamic as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for refreshing my brain from our conversations at NACAC.
There we go.
Len, do you have any last questions for Amanda and Gil?
I do not. Again, I just want to thank you both. Gil, as always, just thank you for your support. And not only of Capture, our community, but the overall higher education community. And thank you again, Amanda, for leading our strategic initiatives.
Thank
Absolutely.
you.
Thanks, guys. We'll see you in a bit. So, Len, we're coming up to the close of our conference. There's a couple of really important housekeeping moments, right? Yep. If I can just steal the screen for a moment. First, if you haven't done so, please go to capture.buzz/Innovate USA and register. The reason for it is not just because I would like for our salespeople to connect with you, but also, and more importantly, we're recording all of the sessions in these in the conference days, today, tomorrow, and Thursday, for anyone who is registered for the conference at capture.buzz/Innovate USA. We will disseminate the recordings. So if there has been content that you have enjoyed, information that you'd like to take back to your campus, make sure that you submit that registration form so that we can get the content in your hands after our live broadcasts. So that's note one. Note two is that when you do that, you'll be entered in for all of the drawings that we have for our giveaways throughout the next 2 days. And finally, if you have not done so yet, I really encourage you to think about donating to support the Boys and Girls Club of America. And you can do that at capture.buzz/donate. So those are the housekeeping items. Len, we've had a pretty amazing couple hours. It's been incredibly fun to do this in a live stream. What are some of your thoughts about the sessions that we've had today?
I'm pumped, right? I mean, it goes to everything what we are about here at Capture. We want to capture the moment with measured results, and we want to make sure everyone has access to it, right? Access to an opportunity, and it drives everything we do, right? And so for us, it's the content, whether it's our content or someone else's content. And in some cases, in the content that you hear, they make mention to competing services, but that's okay, because for all of us, the goal is future forward together. That is what's going to create this community. For us at Capture, and it's owning engagement. We want to own every aspect of engagement. And that's why we have partners such as Platform Q. Tomorrow you hear about Plexus, because when we have interoperability, we can then assess the efficacy of our effort, measure it, and then align it into a bigger predictive model that says, was this investment worth it? We recognize, being stewards of our institutional dollars, we need to measure everything. And in doing so, owning engagement is the first step. So it's critical, and it's something that we are passionate about here at Capture. Absolutely. Also, since you still gave me the microphone, I'd be remiss not to share my screen, if I may, because there's just a few things I want to highlight. Is we did launch today Future Forward. What is that? Future Forward is Capture's response and our partners' response to this post-pandemic environment, and a resource page for our partners and the community as a whole to access blogs, tips, research, right? A plethora of information in order for you to assess, is it relevant for your institution? And if so, download and use it. So if you want to access it, it's simple, capture.buzz/future forward. Capture.buzz/future forward. Lastly, I want to just not only thank everyone for attending today, but remind everyone, tomorrow, now we're going to have a data scientist that's a fire-eating performer, hailing from one of the major research universities of the world, NYU, Dr. Rossi, along with still having a number of giveaways. we have another session by one of our own data scientists, John Foster, and of course, understanding what does search look like in a test optional era. Right? And that's something that we're all facing, whether traditional baccalaureate institution or even a for-profit institution. And so that, please join us tomorrow. Tomorrow, the MC will be Heather, and I will be supporting her. And from all of us here at Capture, we want to thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Again, if you have not registered, Heather, that is?
It is capture.buzz/Innovate USA. But Len, before we shut this down for today, we cannot forget to give away the biggest one of the day, which is, dependent upon which device you prefer, an Apple AirPods Pro or a Samsung Galaxy Buds Plus. And once again, we will be matching the value of that particular prize and donating to the Boys and Girls Club of America on behalf of all of you. So let's go ahead and get that drum roll rolling and see who we have as our winner. Darren E. from Tennessee. Well, that was a fun one. So once again, Darren, we'll be in touch with you to walk through the logistics of making sure that you can collect your prize. On behalf of all, Len, I want to thank our speakers today. You and Jamie bringing the 4 tenets, right? The 4 R's, if you will, of moving through change. Laura, certainly, for her keynote on email communications in today's era with this generation of students. And last but certainly not least, Amanda and Gillen talking about virtual engagement. It has been a great day. I am pumped for tomorrow. I can't wait to see you all there. Feel free to join in on any of the channels. I know when I was talking with my team, they're going to try a different channel every day to have a different experience. But we are looking forward to having the conversation with you tomorrow again. Len, I'll leave it to you to close.
Everyone, thank you again for investing in one another. This is our time to do so, and to do so with the fervor that's necessary for us to continue to be a beacon of opportunity for every American that wants an opportunity for an education. So with that, look forward to seeing everyone tomorrow. And this concludes the first day of Innovate USA 2020. Take care, everyone.
Have a great day, gang.